Fewer things in this life are going to drive you nearly as crazy as trying to have a common sense discussion, conversation with conservatives on literally any topic, but especially when it comes to immigration. But I must be a masochist because that is exactly what I tried to do on Jubilee's Middle Ground. The episode was published about 2 weeks ago now, 3 weeks ago, and I haven't done a reaction video to it because I literally have been sick for that amount of time. I don't know where it came from, but I had to take a break from posting and editing because I just was not feeling any better. I don't know what happened. But anyway, today's episode, I would like to walk you through some of the main prompts that we tried to have a debate on the show and kind of walk you through my own personal process, my reaction to the responses that I received, and yeah, just in general, like how I feel about the episode overall. To give you guys a little bit of context, I have done debates before. This isn't new to me, but it has been a couple of years since I have done a televised, published debate. The last time that I did a debate was when I hosted a debate panel style show through Spotify Original. If you guys have been with me on my day ones, if you've been with me for a long time, you will know Stranger Fruit is a Spotify Original show that I co-hosted with Donovan Thompson of The Grapevine, which was also a panel style debate show that I was also on many years ago. And part of my personal process in, doing this debate in general, because I was not there to convince conservatives of my point of view, especially people who are in a debate, you're generally not trying to convince their minds. What I was there to do was to, one, provide expertise. I am a journalist who has covered immigration. And I was there to provide my personal perspective as a Latina woman, Indigenous woman who is technically not considered a migrant because Puerto Rico is part of the United States, but I do have the migrant experience. And so I was there to kind of debunk a lot of disinformation and a lot of the rhetoric that I knew that they were going to come with, which they absolutely did. So with that disclaimer behind us, if you are new here, make sure that you hit the subscribe button. If you are on Substack or on YouTube, this does help me out a lot. The way that you can support me best is to become a paid subscriber over on Substack, because that helps me do a lot of the work that I've not been able to do, quite honestly, because I haven't had the level of support that I need in order to do the work that I would prefer to do, which is my personal projects. So if you would like to go to Substack, you can go to malcriamedia.substack.com and become a paid subscriber there. It's the cost of a latte, so easy. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into today's episode. I have the video pulled up. Let's go ahead and watch.
Due process with an illegal immigrant should be, let me see your papers. Oh, you don't have them? They don't exist? Okay, get out of the country. It shouldn't be an entire court case to figure out if someone's illegal. That's a waste of taxpayer dollars. That's a waste of time.
Let me see your papers and get out, buddy. That is fascism.
ICE should be abolished and replaced with a different agency. Can the Greer step forward?
One thing that I want to say is that, anytime that you do a debate in general, the first prompt is typically and usually just you trying to get your bearings on what is the opposition going to say, what is what are the things that I want to make sure that I get my point across on. And the way that this specific debate middle ground is set up is that it's 4-on-4. So it can get a little bit chaotic. It absolutely did get chaotic. But I thought production did a really good job of trying to keep us not only on point, but try to stop them from, interrupting us as often as they ended up doing. But this very first prompt, obviously I was in agreement with. As you can see, I went and sat down on the chairs. I am for abolishing ICE and prosecuting agents who break the law. I thought that the cast was really diverse. I was afraid that we were not going to be walking into a diverse situation, that it was going to be mostly people of color on the anti-ICE side and mostly white folks on the pro side. But as you have seen from the beginning of the trailer or beginning of the video, The pro-ICE side was also just as diverse. I have a lot of thoughts on that, but I want to show you first how we answered this prompt and how they did, and then we can kind of talk about the dynamics of that. But that is just the first point that I want to bring up, is that it actually was a very diverse conversation.
Well, let's start off with the obvious.
Yeah.
This is an invented problem. This is a problem that was invented by the billionaire class and their proxies to shift the attention away from the fact that they have participated in 40 years of neoliberalism, which has decimated the working class. And so they do the oldest trick in the book. They invent a problem and get working class people to be divided by blaming immigrants and the most vulnerable.
This has been a continuous problem for so many years in America, where we blame immigrants for any kind of like current problem that we have because it's just an easy scapegoat. The billionaires don't even pay their fair share in taxes.
I think there's just a safer way to handle a situation. If you want law to do something, there's just a safer way to go about doing it.
Yeah. And I think from my point of view, ICE is a new institution. They didn't exist past 25 years ago. We didn't need them before, and we can do without them now. And I think if your agency and your institution is actively violating the Constitution, violating people's civil rights, killing American citizens and migrants, I don't think you should exist anymore. I think there are other pathways that we can utilize and call upon in order for us to actively keep people safe, if that is what the other side is claiming that we need.
Yeah, and let's be honest.
Okay, so just here real quick, I do want to say I stand 10 toes down on everything that I just said. If your federal agency is actively racially profiling people, killing, killing people in the streets, shooting them indiscriminately, I don't believe that you should exist. The fact that this was the very first prompt, I thought was really good to just kind of set the tone, because as you will soon see, the pro-ICE side absolutely disagreed with us. And generally, the pro-ICE side is very like law and order, but they will go on to make quite a few excuses for federal agents who have actually broken the law and shot American citizens. I think plaid shirt guy, I'm forgetting his name right now, plaid shirt guy and myself were the only ones with actual expertise on the topic on the anti-ICE side. On the pro-ICE side, I don't believe they had any actual experts, quote unquote, on their side. I was expecting that we were going to be debating like an ex-ICE agent, but I was wrong on that. There were no ICE agents or even law enforcement. I thought maybe, oh, we'll get like law enforcement for sure. They didn't even have that. So I think these are just people with strong opinions. But on the anti-ICE side, the plaid shirt and myself were the only actual experts on this debate.
Let's look at Homeland Security broadly and CPB, which encompasses 22 agencies. It's incredibly convoluted, and they're involved with like the, human trafficking, drugs, cartels. So actually, the amount of resources that are being pulled from actually the agencies that are doing the deep work to confront cartels and gangs and drugs is going to persecute cooks, line cooks, taco vendors,
Farm workers.
farm workers.
We have a criminal justice system already, right? If somebody commits a crime, they already go through a very particular system that doesn't have to exclude migrants. If somebody does actively commit a crime, call the police and they go to jail, right? If they are prosecuted and they go through their due process. I vehemently am completely opposed to just deporting people just because you don't want them here, just because you can't figure out a proper solution. That's what the criminal justice system is for.
You don't know if they broke the law or did
Right.
anything.
Exactly.
And there is a
And the reason that I made that point specifically is not necessarily to advocate for the criminal justice system, because there are so many things wrong with our current judicial system. It's like that could be its own separate debate. But the reason I brought that up is because I knew that the pro-ICE side was going to bring up crime and punishment and law abiding and all their little talking points. And so that's the only reason that I actively brought that up. Not because I'm this huge advocate for the criminal justice system. That's not something that I was able to clarify in this debate, but I wanted to clarify that here.
broader context that we are experiencing the full throes of currently the fifth stage of fascism. And historically, if you study the history and the anatomy of fascism, it is important for fascist regimes to have loyalist, paramilitaries. And that is critical to the goals of any fascist regimes.
ICE is being funded like a
Yes.
secret army, a secret police
Correct.
force to enact a fascist regime's agenda.
Yes,
Point blank.
Okay, so that last part, I definitely triggered the pro-ICE side with that last part because they will adamantly come after that specific point. But did we lie? Where is the lie? Because I don't want to say every expert, but a lot of experts who study fascism and fascist regimes will say that there is a playbook, and this funding ICE to this degree and sending them after people to, not enact due process, but just to snatch them out of their homes without the proper warrants, without the proper protocols, shooting people in the streets, shooting American citizens indiscriminately, like all of that is part of the fascist playbook. So where did I lie? I would love to know, but they are going to try and make their points against us. And again, all they wanted to do was just have their talking points and not actively like have a discussion, which made it really, really challenging. But yeah, this was what's about to come is very interesting.
The disagreeer step forward.
I think two things can be true at once, right? We can talk about billionaires and corporate greed and why they make things harder for the working class. That's all valid. However, that does not take away from the fact that there's illegal immigrants here that don't belong here. They take up housing, they take away resources. You replace ICE with another agency, what exactly is the difference? We still need an agency that takes care of illegal immigrants. And to say, why do they need so much money? Well, the only reason why we need ICE so much now is because we had so many illegal immigrants. I agree with you. It's a made up problem. It shouldn't be a problem. You came here illegally, so it's ICE's job to get you out. That's just common sense.
And as
Okay. Woo. Okay, so I posted a clip of this debate on my Instagram and got a lot of responses about her specifically. Like I said, this ended up being a really, really diverse debate. I was not expecting there to be people who look like they are children of migrants or migrants themselves. And I have a question about the girl in the red shirt right here. I think she is a migrant because she has an accent. However, I was not expecting that people who look like they could be racially profiled by ICE themselves were going to be defending ICE so adamantly, nearly to the degree that these people did. It was not shocking, yet so surprising, and I found myself to be so annoyed by her because she was so dehumanizing to people who look like her. People who are coming from Haiti, people who are coming from Sudan, from Congo. From South America, she spewed so much dehumanizing rhetoric that I literally just, ooh, she needs to have her come to Jesus moment for real, for real. Okay, let's continue.
You said, by the way, you mentioned all these other departments and agencies. HSI is under ICE. So if you're going to abolish ICE, you're going to abolish all the other departments under ICE, like HSI, which handles, like you said, human trafficking, drug trafficking, and money laundering. You abolish ICE, and they're doing a lot of good, and you're going to just remove that, thinking it's just going to be the deportations, but it's all other parts of crime, like those others that I mentioned, that would also be abolished, and then replaced with the same thing, just like as you said.
That's not accurate.
That's not.
But ICE
not
only
accurate.
focuses
None of you actually addressed the actual prompt. The prompt was, if ICE was to, would you get rid of ICE and replace it with something else? None of you laid out any grounds for what you would replace it with, how you would replace it, and how it would be any different from ICE. I heard people talk about billionaires, fascism. I heard people talking about crime rates,
so
which
triggered
was
by the
very
fascism
inaccurate as
movement.
well. But none of you actually laid out any groundwork for what it would look like. So I would like to hear that really quick from you guys. What would this new system look like, or what would this new force look like
First
that's
off,
going to deport illegal
What
immigrants?
is your understanding of what the crime rates are,
Okay.
since you brought it up?
The crime rates,
Before they get into this, I find myself already tired of the argument that, oh, simply because you're in the United States that and undocumented, that automatically makes you a criminal. He's about to explain why he thinks that's true. I don't like to have that debate because the documentation process in this country is incredibly expensive. It's incredibly long, and it's inaccessible for most people. However, this argument of like, is it a misdemeanor? Is it actually breaking the law? Is it a civil offense? Whatever. That part for me doesn't hold nearly as much water, especially if we are going to be a country that commits to this mythology of the American dream. And like it, you can come here and you can, be a part of this country, and you can create jobs, and you can start small businesses, and you can have this American dream of like owning a home and all of that stuff. That myth that the United States has created is the reason so many migrants come here. And then to say, oh, just because you're here, that makes you a criminal, like, then stop the propaganda of the American dream. Like, for me, it doesn't hold water. For these people, apparently it does. So I just wanted to point that out. And I had to pick my battles with these people because they were spewing so many like one-liners and like so much rhetoric that all at once, that it was like I literally just had to pick my battles with them. So this specific thing was not a battle that I was interested in, but I will speak in a second.
Every single one of them has violated U.S. Code 81325, making them a criminal under federal law. Every single one of them.
Okay. What is, in the eyes of the law, what is that commensurate with?
It is a misdemeanor.
Yes, misdemeanor on
And
par
it's a
with.
federal law.
On par with.
Are you saying we shouldn't prosecute misdemeanor crimes?
I'm saying, do we need a $75 billion private force that are masked, that are shooting American citizens to prosecute shoplifters?
It's an
Is that what you're
extremely
arguing?
oversimplified way of putting how ICE operates, but I would like you guys to address my actual question that I asked you. What does this new force look like
Here's
when
my
you
point right
replace
here.
ICE? How are they any different from any other law enforcement agency? Because you talk about killing Americans, but a police officer and NYPD officer literally just shot an American today.
And how many people has the ICE shot? 14 since September.
Transgenders have shot more than ICE has shot in the
14
last year.
people
What does it have to
since
do with transgender
September. The first thing is DHS is not going to cease to exist if you get rid of ICE. That is a completely different agency that was created after 9/11 by Bush. The reason that this entire agency exists is because of what happened after 9/11. So if you didn't need it before 9/11, then you can do the same thing now. What you don't need is an agency that is going completely rogue. That is what you don't need. So what you
don't know why
replace
he's
it with
laughing.
is
Okay.
what we already have, a criminal justice system. Simply being in this country is not a crime. It is a civil infraction, like he was mentioning.
Okay, so I'm gonna pause it there. I forgot to mention that guy, the only white guy on their side, we only had one white girl on our side as well. The only white guy on their side, I lovingly call January 6th because, sir, you are giving, I was at the Capitol on January 6th. Like, I need to know where you were on January 6th. But anyways, besides the point, he and I did not get along. We ended up having a lot of back and forth, so much so to the point where he was extremely misogynistic. There is a part in here that you are about to see that where he made two different separate misogynistic jokes or whatever comments about me or towards me in particular. But I found him to be like probably the most insufferable. Like, not a critical thinker, definitely not somebody who fully thought out their points. He made a video about me and the other people, the anti-ICE people, later on that I found hilarious. He definitely claimed that we don't think in common sense terms and that none of what we were saying was true, blah, blah, blah. So like, that's the level of person that we're dealing with here. He also mentioned at a later point in the episode that he is in media. I don't know if he like ever worked for like Fox News or one of these other like, right-wing outlets, but I found that to be really interesting where like he tried to make a point about how you can't trust media, but then he said he's in media. So can you trust media or not? Because if you're in media, then you would think, hey, are you trustworthy or not? Personally, I would never trust this man with any fact checking in my life. That's neither here nor there. So anyway, I found him to be quite insufferable. He interrupted me a lot. That doesn't come across nearly as much on the edit as it did in person. But yeah, the guy has some really wild and dehumanizing points. But anyway, that civil infraction statement that I just made, That is true. A lot of conservatives tried to do the gotcha online to say, like, haha, no, if you cross the border, it's definitely a crime. It definitely makes you illegal. I was not talking about crossing the border. I chose my words very wisely. I said, simply being in this country is not a crime. It is a civil infraction. That is true. I was not talking about the border. If I was, I would have said simply crossing the border because that actually isn't true, right? Most migrants are not crossing the border. Most migrants are coming here with passports, with visas, with workers' visas, student visas, HB1 visas. Like, most migrants are coming here correctly. They have some sort of documentation that they are presenting in order to show the government, hey, I'm here. I'm entering your country. People who are, quote unquote, crossing the border, for the most part, they are not the ones that are in the millions and millions and millions, right? The ones that conservatives try to say, oh, this is an invasion, right? That is not actually happening. There is no invasion at the borders. We have two of them, by the way. Most of the time, they're just talking about the Mexico border. We don't have an actual invasion. That's not happening. They are in the minority. People who cross the border are actually in the minority. And that, besides that, people who are crossing the border without going through some sort of checkpoint are even more in the minority. So what I was saying is that simply just being in the country is a civil infraction. It is not undocumented, by the way, is a civil infraction. When you look at the definition of a civil infraction, it is a non-criminal offense. Therefore, calling and labeling an immigrant who is undocumented an illegal person is factually untrue. Why? Because it is according to the definition of a civil infraction, it is a non-criminal offense. Therefore, say it with me, kids, you are not a criminal. It is not a crime to be in this country undocumented. So, that is something that just completely flies over their heads. Like, they can't even have a proper conversation with me because they're not operating under the same reality as I am. If you look at the definition of a civil infraction, it is a non-criminal offense, but they continue to call them illegal immigrants because the only thing in their minds is all of these migrants are crossing the border, like outside of a checkpoint. That is not what is happening. Most migrants coming from any country, we're not even talking about European countries, right? Any country. Most migrants are coming here with some sort of documentation. Otherwise, you can't enter the country. You can't fly on a plane from London to New York without a passport. It's just never going to happen. You're never getting on that plane, right? So most people are just committing some sort of civil infraction if they don't renew their visas or if they, don't leave vacation on time, right? Like, that is what I am talking about. So anybody who's trying to claim she's lying, I'm not. That is exactly what I was talking about. I was not, however, talking about people who are crossing the border, not at a checkpoint, basically hopping the fence, as they call it. I was not talking about those people. Those people are in the very, 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 very minority. Even so, I still wouldn't dehumanize them to the point of labeling them illegal immigrants, because a lot of these people, the reason that they are crossing the border outside of a checkpoint, hopping the fence, cutting the line, as some of these conservatives would love to say, the reason that is happening is because they don't have the money to pay for the documentation process. They are trying to flee really, really bad situations to enter a country that has mythologized the American dream so heavily that they want to be a part of that process. But they can't enter that process without a lot of money, thousands of dollars that they do not have, because the countries that they are coming from are impoverished. A lot of the times because of the insane policies and imperialist policies that the US enacts on them. So the US creates a problem and then cries about it when they think that they have an illegal invasion. Like, it literally makes no sense. So anyway, I needed to clarify that because conservatives love to point that out as she's lying. I'm not. I chose my words wisely. That's what I was talking about.
functioning. So if your actual argument is, well, they are criminals, that's factually untrue. But if they actually do commit a crime, let's say they are already in this country and they do commit a crime, they get a DUI, they murder somebody, then they go through the criminal justice system, which already exists. So you don't actually have to replace ICE with anything. We already have it.
So you just talked about in the past 4 years, we had 11 million encounters, 2 million.
Before this guy, Daniel, who is on the pro-ICE side, but I feel like leftist progressives could probably get through to this guy because he seemed a lot more open-minded. Out of everybody on the pro-ICE side, he seemed like, oh shit. Out of everybody on the pro-ICE side, he seemed like he was the most open-minded. And had he and I gone back and forth one-on-one, I feel like we would have had a much more productive conversation. And I probably could have convinced him. This might be just like my brain being like, oh, he could be one of us. I thought he really prepared. I thought he was probably the most prepared. His information is incorrect. Like the facts are that he has are either inaccurate or incorrect. However, I understood his thought process. And because he was able to convey his thought process a lot more clearly than the rest of the pro-ICE side, I think that if he and I were to do a back and forth, we probably could get somewhere. But that's just me. That's just an aside thought.
Got away 7 million illegals that came into the country. And you say, we don't need ICE to deport any of these illegals, and you're not giving an alternative.
I did.
So essentially, do you not want any border control at all? But when you have 10 million illegals come in, housing goes up. First off,
okay, so notice how he said, so you don't want any border control at all. I did not have time to interject in that because, again, there are 3 other people sitting next to me and Plaid Shirt really wanted to talk. So I had to pick my battles. I didn't respond to everything. So that whole thing of like, do you not want border control at all? I was not talking about the minority. I was not talking about the border. I was talking about the majority of migrants, the 95% of migrants who are here with some sort of documentation, but they're not actively documented in terms of becoming a citizen, in terms of becoming a legal resident, that kind of thing. That's who I was talking about. So this premise of, you know, this false equivalency of, well, the reason you have this point is because you just want us to be invaded by a bunch of illegals. That's not accurate at all because number 1, we don't have an invasion. And number 2, that is a part of the minority. If we're going to talk about border control, that is a separate conversation. Border control in both the Canadian border and the Mexican border is something that I don't necessarily agree that we wholeheartedly need. However, the way that it was working before in the past, I thought worked a lot smoother than a lot of the policies that, for instance, Obama started to enact, some of the Democratic presidents started to enact, definitely after Reagan. So after Reagan is when shit really started to hit the fan when it comes to, you know, the migrant problem, when it comes to the conservative point of view. Prior to Reagan, the border was what the border was, right? It was regulated the way it was regulated, not nearly to the same degree as we have now. However, speaking from an Indigenous perspective, living on a colony, an active settlement, which is called the United States, Native Americans are truly the only Americans, right? If we are technically speaking, borders should not exist. The reason I'm saying that now, I did not say that in the episode because I was not talking about border crossings. But anyway, the reason I'm saying that now is because if we're going to talk on technicality and who are the true Americans versus who are the true migrants, Native Americans are the ones that should decide, okay, are we okay with these borders? By and large, most migrants will tell you, most Native Americans will tell you, no, borders should not exist. They didn't exist when our ancestors, had full lay of the land, and they shouldn't exist now. I personally am in agreement with that. However, that is not the current reality that we are in. So my realistic point of view now is that the checkpoints should continue, right? Like if you are crossing the border into Canada, they have checkpoints. They will check your passport just like every other country does. They will check your passport and, they will check your license. And, if you can enter, you can enter. If not, you got to go back. I think that system logically, currently, is what makes sense. And that's it. That's my sense on it. However, I don't personally believe that we should that borders are necessary. And in the long term, borders are, what are they? Even state borders. They're invented. It's a line on a map. Who cares?
Apply
No
for
human being
groceries
is
to
illegal,
go.
buddy.
So there's no countries now?
What a ridiculous straw man.
Okay, I just want to make this point because you said that.
Yeah, that definitely was a ridiculous straw man, 100%. Okay, I want to skip over because January 6th and I end up having a back and forth. I don't know if it's right here. Let's see.
Why do you want to continue supporting an agency that has killed U.S. citizens? When you guys, I understand your whole reason to support ICE is it's to protect Americans, but just based off the last few months we've seen, it hasn't protected any Americans. So why continue supporting a violent agency? Why does it need military funding?
I'd like to start this.
Oh yeah, you go first.
Firstly, I understand this both comes from a place of compassion about where we want to direct it at. In terms of what you said about, the American citizens who died, I would just like to point out that they were instigators, they were obstructing justice, they were preventing the ICE agents from...
Okay, so I remember this part. Notice her accent, by the way. Just want to point that out. She should be on our side. She's on their side. So they're about to get into Alex Pretti and Renee Good. They are definitely not operating on the same reality as we were. I must have watched a different video because what she's about to claim and is claiming is that they obstructed. They came to a protest and they were obstructing. And she's basically weaponizing that as an excuse of why they should have gotten shot. Not why they got shot in general, but why it should have happened. That is crazy talk. I'm sorry, but that is crazy talk. Let's continue.
Doing what they were supposed to do. And why is someone going into a protest with their children, with guns, XYZ?
That part right there, I find hilarious from a group of conservatives who are constantly defending the Second Amendment and the right to free speech. The First Amendment protects anyone from protesting. So now you're saying, why are you bringing your kids to exercise the First Amendment right? That's one. Two, it is a fallacy. It is incorrect that Alex Pretti and Renee Good were at a protest. They were not. They were not at a protest. They were on a road, right? Both of them were just outside. They were legal observers. And they were, first of all, not even impeding in anything. Renee Good was dropping off their partner, or I think they had just dropped off their kids and they were dropping off their partner in their neighborhood. And that was their neighborhood. So it was not a protest. And they were trying to leave and the agents wouldn't let them leave. So that's one. Alex Pretti was trying to help a woman get out of a situation, an altercation with ICE agents who had just come to their area. They weren't even at the protest specifically. They were leaving the area. Tried to leave, tried to help her, had his back turned before he was shot. So we weren't even operating under the same reality. I felt like I was in a Black Mirror episode because I'm like, none of what you're saying is true. But anyway, it was just this part I didn't even try to battle them on because what I was listening to and what I was hearing was that they were not operating under the same facts as I am. Therefore, it's going to be a moot point to try and even argue this with them. So I barely engaged in this one.
Why are you there trying to run over ICE agents? I think that they're doing their jobs and they're being villainized by this protesters on the other side.
One of those American citizens was de-escalating a situation.
I want to say you're talking about law enforcement killing Americans. Like I said earlier, there have been multiple people killed in New York City today by NYPD. Does that mean I'm not going to support the police and NYPD? No, people are committing crimes. They do something that puts them in a situation that will get them killed. I've been pulled over multiple times. I've never had a cop draw their gun on me because I have never given them a reason to. I never reach for my weapon. I never go like this really fast. I never do anything that makes it so they have to draw their weapon. When somebody does something that threatens a police officer or an ICE agent's life, you realize they have less than seconds to make the decision on what to do. I would love you to take a tactical training class and see what it's like to go through that, because these people have to pass it to actually become a police officer or ICE agent. And most people
Okay, so that part is inaccurate. Well, we get into that in this part because an ICE whistleblower literally said we had a use of force, use of deadly force training that the Trump administration actively cut from the training. So they cut their training in half in order, during the Trump administration's first 100 days. So not only are they supposed to get that type of training, but they haven't been getting that type of training, which is why we're seeing an escalation in shootings.
Well, your average citizens will fail at like a 90-something% rate.
You mentioned training. I agree. More training. Is that what's happening? No. Ryan Schwank testified in front of Congress. He is a whistleblower. He was a counsel and a trainer, and they wanted him to lie that they cut 240 hours of training for ICE agents. Trainings on constitutionality, what is overreach, weapons training, really important things.
To add this in, I have no problem with extra training. I actually think they should be trained more.
They wanted him to lie about it.
People are always going to have ulterior motives. There's always going to be bad apples in a bunch. That's not surprising to me. This is the American.
It's not a bad apple.
It's the entire agency.
Yeah, but calling the entire agency a big group of bad apples is the most low IQ thing I've ever heard. That's a lack of logic and critical thinking skills.
But it's not, because we're literally talking about an ICE whistleblower who testified under oath
that they need more training.
That they actively cut the training in half,
Mm-hmm.
and it included use of force. So if we're going to talk about how we need more training, they had more training, and this specific Trump administration told them to cut it in half.
Yes. Do you understand why?
I do.
So that point in particular, I felt like I was talking to a toddler. Because why are you continuing to say they need more training? No, they had it. They had the training. They had the training, and they probably needed more training from the original training. And the Trump administration cut it in half. The training that they already had, that they should have included more hours and even more training on constitutional rights. They cut all of it. So why are you acting like a toddler who doesn't have proper listening skills? Bruh. Yeah, I think we get it.
Well, I think as Stephen Miller's asking for a quota of 3,000 arrests a day, and
I wish it were 10.
Okay, well, yeah, I guess you'll have to reconcile that with your faith.
My faith accepts borders. They actually promote them.
Your faith says nothing.
That little prayer hands that she just did, disgusting. First of all, no. Christianity, which is what I'm assuming he's talking about, does not promote borders. That's a lie.
Borders. We can talk about that later. And in this case, we talked about training, but this is a policy decision because they're essentially trying to pump up their numbers. Does that make sense?
I agree.
3,000 a day. And if you're, here's the thing, what is the percentage of actual? Do you think that the problem is that undocumented people are dangerous criminals? Do you think that's the problem?
No, I think they shouldn't be here. I think if I went to Pakistan, they would kill me. If I went to North Korea, they would torture me and kill me. If I went to certain countries, most of them.
You don't think you can go to Pakistan?
Without a visa and enter illegally? No, they would kill you, actually. They've done it to multiple people.
They have not.
Yeah, so 80% of countries have some form of border control, and 95 have some restriction on immigration. But
again, with the fucking border control, we're not necessarily talking about that. Most migrants are not crossing the border.
when we do it here, somehow it's a big problem because we highlight the few things that bring up an emotionally charged argument instead of just looking at the logic and facts behind it. If you look, 65% of the deportations so far are all by criminals. 15% are violent, 20 to 40% are people with DUIs, drug and fraud crimes, and then the last one is illegal reentry, which is a felony.
Wherever he got those numbers from, inaccurate.
And back to my other just simple question, because I didn't get a yes or no, is a misdemeanor a crime? That's all I want. It's a simple yes or no.
I mean, technically, we're not debating whether or not a misdemeanor is a crime. We're talking about, do we have a $75 billion military force that is deployed against American citizens and against an entire population to prosecute what is essentially a misdemeanor? That is the frame of the conversation, not whether or not a misdemeanor is a crime.
Did you have a problem when Obama deported 6 million?
Yes.
And Bill Clinton deported 11 million?
Yes.
We called him the deporter-in-chief, buddy.
Literally.
You're not pro-Obama?
Personally, I have an enormous amount of critique for President.
Yeah, the fact, so notice like the party allegiance mentality here. The only reason you would bring that up is if you're assuming that anybody who is anti-ICE is automatically like just simping for Democrats, when that is not true. I don't consider myself a Democrat. I consider myself an independent thinker, and the Democrats don't always align with they haven't been aligning for several administrations with my leftist progressive points of view. So no, Obama's record on immigration was horrible. But if we're going to talk about Trump, it's not even close. The level of horrible is not even close. So, yeah, no, fuck Obama. The fuck?
Obama, absolutely.
That's a good.
I don't want to get into it, but I mean, he expanded the military, police state, executive actions. He created a failed state in Libya. I mean, but the thing is, like, Trump never matched Obama's deportation numbers, which it goes back to the problem that this was never an issue. Donald Trump capitalized on white supremacy for political power, because the fact is, Obama was the deporter in chief. It's not like this wasn't a thing that was being addressed. It was gross overreaches by President Obama. So you have to pick a lane.
Let's go ahead and move on to the second prompt. So this is ICE agents are unfairly vilified.
I think this a lot has to do with what you were saying about the way media portrays them. And I think it's feeding the flame of what the other side believes and they're protesting. And I actually want to say, funnily enough, that these protesters, they're creating barricades, hence borders in their streets to see if ICE agents are coming through their streets and vetting them. So I thought that was very interesting that they're doing that on that side. But
her accent gets me every time. I'm like, girl, it's kind of like Melania. Every time you hear her speak, you're like, girl, wake up. Wake up. These people don't want you. I'm going to skip ahead to the part where we're actually debating.
May I address your statement you said about minding your business?
Yes.
During BLM, minding my business, walking to my car, and I was gunned down by the police. So your statement about just minding your business will not get you in trouble. I don't remember exactly what you said, but
Can I clarify?
I was gunned down minding my business.
That's why I said I understand why people have more of a disdain or distrust for police than they do for ICE. Because that was a cop. That wasn't ICE, right?
Well, that was, I guess, a bunch of FBI people or whatever during BLM. It wasn't really ICE, but
Yeah, so
ICE is still the law for you guys,
That's what
right?
I'm saying. It's easy for me to support ICE because I feel like cops are more likely to do stuff like that, but ICE is strictly for immigrants.
Yes.
So that's what I'm saying.
And even, okay, unpacking that statement, most of the people that ICE has murdered are U.S. citizens. So how do you square that with your logic? It's also dehumanizing logic. ICE is only going after illegals. So you're okay with them actively hunting down human beings just because you don't see them as your own because they're not technically citizens. It's such dehumanizing rhetoric, and it's also inaccurate.
I understand why there's more of a distrust for like local police than there is ICE, because ICE just goes after immigrants.
Okay, but the man who was minding his business, I believe he was a nurse or a doctor, I'm not 100% sure, he was de-escalating a situation and executed.
He put his hands on an ICE officer. The minute you put your hands on a law enforcement officer, I don't care what you're trying to do, and you have a gun, you basically have a death wish. That's just...
So the Second Amendment people are like, why do you have a gun? Aren't you for the Second Amendment? And it was a legal concealed carry. He was not holding it. It was just on his person, and it was concealed because he had a legal concealed carry. Like, we're not even dealing in the same reality. These people are so hypocritical.
That's how I was raised. You don't put your hands on law enforcement officers. You don't get into scuffles when you know you have a gun.
So it was okay to be executed.
They thought that he had a gun. They thought that he was trying to shoot him.
He was on his knees on the ground.
How? Okay, but I'm saying
with a gun.
It's so easy in hindsight.
With a gun. So murder him on the back of the head. The fuck?
Walk around with a gun?
I'm saying yes, exactly. But if you know you have a gun, do not try to get involved in a scuffle. The woman, the ICE officer pushed, maybe he shouldn't push her like that, whatever. But she was fine. He did not have to physically get involved. Because look, now he's dead.
She was fine. She was just getting manhandled and beaten up by a cop.
And the woman's fine.
Okay.
I'm saying, though, the thing is, if you know you have a gun, you need to act accordingly. Don't be getting in scuffles. Don't resist arrest, because look what happened.
That's one of the first.
He wasn't resisting. You can't resist arrest because ICE is not allowed to arrest U.S. citizens. So that's one. He wasn't resisting arrest. What he was resisting was being pushed onto the ground and being attacked by what ended up being around 7 different federal agents who weren't even telling him what he was doing wrong or weren't even giving him proper orders. They were all giving him conflicting orders. And then he was shot while he was on his knees. Why was he on his knees? Because again, he was getting beat the hell up by a bunch of federal agents who were breaking the law.
So unfairly vilified. The reason I didn't step forward is because we have so much documentation proving that, again, they are not being trained properly. Therefore, they are violating people's civil rights. They're violating the Constitution, the 4th, 5th, and 6th Amendment. There's no reason to not unfairly vilify them because of that specifically. If you are an American and you are against people being undocumented, make the process easier. But instead, what we have done, or this specific administration has done, is send out enforcement to go out and walk into people's homes without the proper warrant, without a judicial warrant. They have been explicitly told to do that. And we're mentioning IDs. People have had IDs. They have showed them. They have had their papers, specifically American citizens, have showed ID and passports, and they have still been detained for weeks and months at a time without the proper due process of being allowed to have a lawyer to even come and speak to verify their birth certificates and things like that. So even if you had the papers, even if you're an American citizen, even if you are a lawful resident, for example, even if you have a visa, for ICE, it does not matter. And we have so much documented evidence of that. I'm in the media, actually.
Okay, before I get into this point, this is where he says, me too. Whatever. Before we get into that point, all of what I just said, verifiable. Why? Because American citizens were invited to testify in front of Congress about their personal experience being racially profiled by ICE, targeted by ICE, and shown their IDs, their quote unquote papers, their visas, their passport, whatever they had on them. These were American citizens who were then detained anyway, thrown into detention centers, and some of them had been there for months, or even one Palestinian woman was there for like a year. We have so much verifiable evidence to prove that they are actively violating people's constitutional rights. It's crazy. So this idea of just show your papers and they'll let you go. It's the same illogical logic around just comply with the police and you won't get murdered, because people do comply and they still get murdered.
If we want to truly have a process for documentation, let's do that. I'm for that. But what we can't sit here and do is be intellectually dishonest and say, well, we shouldn't vilify them because they've shot 14 people. Most of those people have been American citizens. That's just not true.
Period. So this prompt is immigration enforcement should focus only on violent criminals. I disagree.
An entity should exist. I don't think that they need to go after violent criminals and just target them, because again, we have a criminal justice system that does that. If you want specific things around documentation, then we already have agencies for that too. If somebody wants to get a visa, if somebody wants to become a legal or permanent resident, or if somebody wants to become a citizen. So I don't think that, this targeting of specifically violent criminals, I think it's a moot point.
Can I just say, I don't really think it matters. If you come into this country illegally, you do not have to commit like an extra crime, like a bonus crime.
If you come into this country illegally, again, I think she's conflating all immigration with people who are crossing the border outside of checkpoints. That is like 5% of migrants, maybe less. Like, we're not even operating on the same page, because most migrants are not coming through the border.
In order to be deported, the first thing you did when you came into the country was break a law. We do not have to wait for you to break.
Again, a civil infraction is a non-criminal offense.
2 laws to then deport you. I feel like that doesn't make any sense. And to talk about your point, what agency is going to be responsible for deporting people?
I don't believe we should be deporting people.
So we should
That's
just leave
my
millions
point,
of people. We should
that
leave
if you would like to have a deeper conversation about documentation, if you would like to have a deeper conversation about people breaking their visas, for instance, we can have that conversation. There are already agencies that exist for that. I personally don't believe that you need to deport somebody to a different country in order for the laws in this country to be, absolved. Like, there are are already ways of doing that.
Okay,
I don't
but-
believe in deportation.
Okay, but a lot of times, let's say people commit crimes and then they get a slap on the wrist. You're saying that, like, let's say if somebody committed like a sex crime against a child and they got 5 years. You're saying after those 5 years that like person that never was here legally, you're saying that he should still stay in the country and he shouldn't be deported after he served his sentence?
If they committed a crime, they go through the criminal justice system. If you don't like that they only got 5 years, change the law. There are plenty of advocacy organizations that do that. But you can't just say, well, they committed a crime, so let's ship them off to a different country to commit more crime. Is that your premise?
No. I think that if you're a legal immigrant and you commit a crime, you should serve time in American prison so we know the victim got justice. And then once you're done with your sentence, you don't get to just enjoy America. You go back to wherever you came from because you never belonged here and you committed a crime and harmed an American.
So then it's not about crime and punishment for you.
It is.
But it's not.
It is.
Because they already went through the criminal justice system, but for you, it's not enough time.
But they were illegal, so they didn't deal with being that. They never got deported for that.
So again, there are already agencies that go through that process of documentation.
For being illegal?
For documentation.
Okay, who is going to send them back? No, you're saying that we shouldn't send anybody back.
Okay. Like, we're talking past each other at this point because she's like, well, but they don't belong here. And I'm saying if they go through the proper documentation process, that is up to the documentation court to be like, if you've already committed a crime, no, you cannot get citizenship. If that is what the court upholds, right? We're talking about due process, right? The Law and Order group should know that. You go through the proper documentation process, which includes a judge. If they say no, because you were already convicted of a crime, you went through that due process and they convicted you, no, you are not allowed citizenship. However, what I am saying is that the entire premise around deportation is a false premise. And I think I actually say that here.
No,
that's crazy.
Deportation is a false premise. If if you would like to go and visit Paris tomorrow and you spend a week in Paris and you say, you know what, I really like Paris. I want to see if there's any jobs here. You look for jobs and then you decide, you know what? Yeah, I want to apply for that job. You go through the interview process. Then you have to then go through their documentation process, right?
Exactly. I'm going through the process.
You going through that process for you in your mind, that's the legal way of going about it, correct?
Exactly.
That is what people do here. Now, if they break their visas, if they decide not to go through that documentation, then yes, there is an agency that can already go through that process.
Okay, but what happens if I go to Paris without a passport, without any documentation? Like, man, I want some croissants.
That would never happen.
And you know, I just want to stay here. I don't have any passport. I don't have any visa. What would happen in Paris?
Just real quick though, in other countries, Spain, Portugal, there is a pathway to citizenship. So you actually can go over, you actually can go through a process, apply, but here, there isn't the same process. There are people who are spending 30 years applying. There isn't a pathway to citizenship.
Correct.
There isn't a pathway to go through the system. It just doesn't exist. And this is important because so many of the crises that are happening, that are forcing these people to come as refugees, are created by the United States.
Correct.
Like, the decades of dirty wars waged by our CIA, a good percentage of the drug trade is fueled by Americans' consumption. I've talked about the crisis in Venezuela, 100% happened because of U.S. policy.
Correct.
So we have to look at the underlying causes. It's easy to just make those anecdotal points or hypothetical points, but you have to look at the underlying causes.
Okay, so this prompt is, family separation is a necessary consequence of immigration enforcement.
I mean, where do we start? I think I don't remember who said it, but something about birthright citizenship, and that confuses me a little bit because literally anybody who is born in this country has citizenship, right?
The reason I said that confuses me a little bit is because his claim was that we should completely remove birthright citizenship as a right. And so I'm about to make my case as to why that's confusing as hell, because then that would mean everybody in this room would no longer be a citizen, assuming that all of us are citizens. I don't know about homegirl with the accent. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know her status, but every single person in the room would then no longer have birthright, because how the fuck are you going to enact that?
Don't have to go through a very deep process like migrants do. So if your premise is that we should just take that away, are we taking that away for everybody? And now everybody then has to go through some sort of documentation process. At what age does that documentation process then start? Because you can't just pick and choose, right? You can't just say that you're only going to apply it for the kids of migrants and not to the kids of every citizen.
Yes, because they would be citizens because their parents are citizens. If you're not a citizen of America and you come into America and you have a kid to give your kid citizenship because you think it'll give you a better chance at staying, or you think you're doing something better for your child, you are not only putting your child at risk because their parent might now get deported, but it's also abusing a loophole in a law that should not be there in the first place.
Okay, so I'm going to interject here. So his premise is, well, yes, they would be citizens because their parents are citizens. So then how do you determine the parents are citizens? Birthright. Correct? If they were born in this country, that means they have birthright citizenship. But if you're then taking away a birthright, bruh, how? That's why I was like, you haven't thought this out, because how are you going to enact not having birthright?
It was made for the creation of slaves' children.
So you're saying citizenship is a loophole now?
I'm saying birthright citizenship, having an anchor baby in this country as an illegal immigrant.
But that implies intent. So what you're assuming is that every migrant who has a baby in this country is automatically just wanting that to go through a loophole.
How about if it's one a citizen parent and a non-citizen parent having a baby? Would that baby, in your opinion, of birthright citizenship?
I think the reason she's asking this question is because potentially one of her parents is actually a migrant. Because why would you try to get this level of clarification from the guy on your side? Because now what's happening is they're both kind of trying to like debate each other now. And I just sat back and I thought, that's interesting. Is one of your parents a migrant?
Should if
No, I don't think it should be rewarded citizenship.
Even if at least one parent.
I actually think you should charge the husband for aiding and abetting a crime for protecting an illegal immigrant.
Yeah.
You saw her face? Oh my God. Her face was like, okay. So what he just said is that the parents now, so now you're no longer just going after the migrants, you're going after the parents of the kids of migrants, and saying, well, if one of you is an American citizen and one of you is not, the American citizen should not be prosecuted for aiding and abetting what? A non-criminal offense? Again, we're not even dealing in the same reality.
I agree and disagree. Like, I understand there's a loophole, and I could definitely see where he's coming from, and I understand it completely. And then when she brought up the point where one and one, like, I mean, I think that's a good middle ground. I mean, we're here for a middle ground. So, I mean, I respect exactly where he's coming from.
This is why I said, like, had me and this guy, Daniel, had the opportunity to just debate each other, I feel like we would have gotten really far, because he's at least open and minded enough, even if I disagree on what he's being open-minded about here. He's at least open-minded enough to be like, okay, yeah, I could see how you got there, but I still disagree, or here's my premise about it. Like, he's at least willing to hear people out. That is how you have a proper conversation. The January 6th guy was not interested in having a proper conversation. American flag girl here was not interested in having a proper conversation, because they were so cemented in their bias that they didn't want to have a proper conversation. They're not even dealing in the same legal reality as we are, right? But anyway, the other point that I want to make here is that there is no loophole. Birthright citizenship is not a loophole. And if a migrant is pregnant when they come into this country and they have a child in an American hospital, whether they did that on purpose or not, because there are plenty of women who come on vacation to the United States and have babies while they're on vacation. It happens, right? Sometimes it happens when babies are premature. They're born premature. That is why a lot of pregnant women actually stopped flying, because flying can induce labor. And so sometimes it happens, right? It's not because they want to have this concept of an anchor baby. That's why I said it implies intent. You can't assign intent to every single situation like that.
I could disagree with him, but I'll respect exactly where he's coming from because I understand it.
It's a more extreme take to some. I get it.
I don't understand how you guys can sit here and want to separate families. I get your side, whatever. But I don't understand how you could sit here and just be pro separating families.
Yeah,
That's
so
just me.
Not that we want it to happen. You're just taking accountability all the way from the parents that should be going through the legal processes. And actually, if we're giving them the option to either get deported with their family or stay here, they're actually separating their families within themselves, actually, because they have the final decision.
Well, you say we, but he disagrees with you. If we have to sit through all of this, like Nick Fuentes, griper, incel bullshit, talking about anchor babies. Okay, this is about white supremacy. He's proving it right now. That's pure and simple. Excuse me.
what?
I mean, I think ultimately we're missing out something. We're missing out on what it fundamentally means to be human beings. And there is a premise. The premise are that these people are not human beings. They're
Correct.
being dehumanized. And so it doesn't matter what happens to them. We can throw them in detention camps. We can kick them out. Because fundamentally, the rhetoric that is coming from DHS, the rhetoric that is coming from the White House is about the great replacement theory. And these are your people. You are on board with this. I can see by your message that you're about it.
real.
Yeah, okay. See, this is white supremacy. The rhetoric that has been coming from the president, from Steve.
The fact that he was like, yeah, white replacement theory is real. And then he's like, yeah, that's a white supremacist theory. And he goes, no, you just said white replacement. White is in there. That is a white supremacist theory. Otherwise, you'd be like, oh, it doesn't matter if white replacement is real because I don't believe in white supremacy. Hello. These people lack so much critical thinking.
Stephen Miller from DHS on the official websites. They're actively promoting white supremacist tropes. Okay, it's not funny.
It is.
So I want to go back to the question about family separation. The reason that I did not step forward is because I think that there is actually a much better way of going about what to do with the families that are going to be affected if somebody is found to be undocumented. And what's actually happening with family separation right now is that either, yes, the parent is being removed, whether they're being put in ICE detention or they are being actively deported. That the children of these people are then either left because they are considered U.S. citizens, or they are also now being put in ICE detention centers, even if they are citizens. I think that fundamentally creates a lot of chaos within the system. And it's actually been proven because we have, for instance, a reporter out of the Washington Post who has been documented or who has been documenting the process of what a person goes through, whether it's an adult or a child, in these ICE detention centers, in order to not have such a chaotic system which overrides everything. I think that the best way to deal with the children of migrants, if that child is then also a migrant, I think that you can do it in such a way where you go through a documentation process for everybody, and that way they are allowed citizenship if that is what the court decides. Other than that, separating families has already proven to be extremely chaotic, extremely traumatic for everybody involved, both the parents and the children. And I don't think you actually have to go through that. I think that there are much better ways of dealing with this, which includes, again, a better and easier pathway to citizenship.
Okay, and again, to cement my point, is that the reason I believe that is because our own legal definition of a civil infraction is that it is a non-criminal offense. Therefore, if you were to go try and get the entire family through the documentation process, there wouldn't necessarily be a lot of roadblocks there because you are not a criminal. You are not a criminal. You haven't committed a crime. You are going through the documentation process, which is the legal pathway towards citizenship. The problem is that our current system is it makes it so insanely difficult and expensive to go through that documentation process in a timely fashion that a lot of people end up being in the system for decades before they even hear, yeah, we've granted you citizenship or not. So somebody could be going through the documentation process for at least a decade or more and be denied citizenship, or they could go through the process a decade or more and be accepted. Now, the other thing that we didn't even get into is green cards, right? Melania Trump has a green card. Melania Trump was undocumented for a portion of time and then was granted citizenship by way of green card. Interesting how that works.
And regardless of whatever the political party is, because you're right, it did happen under Obama. But I want to tell you something that is really distinct. I actually got to work with DHS when the regime changed to Biden. And again, I have a lot of critique for the Biden administration as well. And what we were asked to do by the same staff who worked under Trump, who described the horrible conditions for these children, suffering children. We were asked to bring in clowns, musicians, something that, and I agree, I think the whole thing is deplorable, but the experience that these children got to have under the next regime was dramatically different. And if you can co-sign the behavior of mistreating children like that, I don't know what to say about it.
Kids in juvie are treated pretty poorly too. And who put the kids in cages in the first place? Just
Yes, kids in juvie are treated very poorly because, again, our criminal justice system dehumanizes people they consider to be criminals. You are basically proving our point. Hate to break it to you.
Curious, do you know?
That's happened under every
Who put them in there
administration.
in the first place?
And it was bad for them too.
I agree.
It was Obama who did it first.
And
of all.
we
But
were
second of all,
against that
like I
too.
said, the kids in juvie are treated just as poorly. It's irrelevant.
But you think
The
that the,
entire thing is just an emotional, long
we can fix
sentence.
all
Yes.
we can fix all the systems
yes,
that
kids
involve
being
children.
mistreated is
We can fix all the systems that involve children, is what I said, but he's not advocating for that.
emotional.
Yes, you can't.
And
let
if
your
you don't
emotions
if you don't
dictate
think so,
your
you are a
actions.
psychopath.
ICE detention conditions are inhumane.
There's been really good reporting on the ICE detention centers and the process that people have to go through. The inhumane conditions in these detention centers is really, really difficult to stomach, quite honestly. Every administration has honestly failed when it comes to not just deporting, but also when it comes to the detention centers.
Yes, every administration has laid the groundwork for what we're experiencing today with the Trump administration as well. So by no means is this a party loyalty thing. I am not a Democratic loyalist. Why? Because both the Democrats and the Republicans have failed in this, when it comes to immigration, when it comes to deportation, when it comes to ICE, funding ICE massively. So that's what separates us from the conservatives.
I think what's specific right now is that we have an administration.
So January 6th decides to sit with us, and I find it confusing. The prompt is ICE detention conditions are inhumane, but he wants detention centers to exist. And we're going to get into it in a second, but not nearly to the degree that I had hoped because we were running out of time. But if you agree that detention conditions are inhumane, but you want them to exist anyway, shouldn't you be fighting to make the conditions more humane? No, he's about to argue later that they're inhumane because you're a criminal. Therefore, it's not going to be, if you are locked up, the point is to punish you. Therefore, the punishment does not fit the crime, in quotes. That's one. And then two, that also violates the Constitution because we got rid of the archaic notion of cruel and unusual punishment, which included inhumane conditions in prison or cells or detention. So the fact that he's sitting with us is actually started to piss me off.
That is trying to fast track everything and opening up new detention centers, and there's no oversight, right? They're not letting congressional members, for instance, who have a legal duty to come and oversee what is actually happening at the detention centers. I think one of
The fact that they all joined us is crazy.
biggest setbacks was Alligator Alcatraz, right? Just even that name, it just goes to show the intention. The intention is not to have people go through their proper due process. It's literally shoving people into a small room with 2 toilets if they're lucky. Hopefully there's plumbing. Hopefully there's AC and electricity in order to make sure that they're not dying of heat exhaustion, for instance. There's just been so much good reporting on what's happening inside of there that I don't think you could honestly say that the conditions are safe.
It's so much worse than that, actually. I have been part of organizing efforts to organize national coalitions to stop the camps.
So this is why I say, like, him and I were probably the only actual experts on the topic because he actually has like real world experience going to the detention centers and advocating for migrants' conditions, and me as a reporter having reported on it.
If you go to stopthecamps.com, you can see what's happening. According to whistleblowers, maggots in the food, people being forced to live in their own feces, women being denied sanitary products, so they've been given diapers. These diapers pile up.
Yeah.
They've been denied, like as you said, denied access to lawyers, and they're actually put in places that are like Alligator Alcatraz, so remote that they cannot get their constitutionally guaranteed right to due process. It's also cruel and unusual punishment, which is also a violation of the 8th Amendment.
Yes.
So we're violating the 4th Amendment, the 5th Amendment, the 6th Amendment, the 8th Amendment,
Correct.
the 14th Amendment, the 13th Amendment if they are refusing to work and they're being punished for it because the 13th Amendment essentially doesn't allow slavery. So
Yeah.
I obviously agree. I had a friend who they took, and they weren't feeding him for a week on time.
It's proven that these institutions, the top two companies that are getting these detention center contracts, are massively failing, and they're hiking up the prices, right? They have a per bed rate, and that money is not going towards the care of these human beings. You can't just throw money and just put up a warehouse and hope for the best. You actually have to go through the legal process of making sure that that is a safe environment. Whether you think that person is a criminal or not is irrelevant. It's still a person.
But I think that's the whole point, is that Core Civic and the Geo Group are massive Trump donors, and this is what we get because it is a profit motive. That's why they're spinning up warehouses, they're turning over bases. The point is they don't have the violent criminals. So just like the school to prison pipeline, just like our broken criminal justice system, they are now having to inflate the numbers and go after people who are working in the fields, people who are working in restaurants. They have to do that to fill these quotas and to fill these beds. But underlying it all is the rankest corporate greed. And if you can actually listen to some of the investor calls, it's disgusting. And these are human rights violations. And I do think that eventually these people are going to all face prosecution, like the Nuremberg trials.
I was going to say I came up because being in jail no matter what is inhumane on some level. It's not supposed to be rewarding. It's supposed to be punishing. It's supposed to be a time of reflection. And it's also supposed to be a place of holding. It's not supposed to be a Hilton. It's not supposed to be a Marriott. It is a cell. It is a containment.
So many levels to that, right? I feel like, and I'm going to make an assumption here, I feel like if it were up to him, they wouldn't have any toilets, and they wouldn't have any running water to brush their teeth, and they would be in solitary confinement if it were up to him forever.
So I don't think it's supposed to. I think anybody who is put in a cell or cage of any kind is not necessarily being treated like the majority of humans are treated. I'm not in a cage right now, for example, to make it obvious.
So you don't think they deserve basic human necessities and rights?
I never said they don't deserve basic human necessities. What I said is, if you are being contained in any way in that manner, you're of course going to be able to define it as inhumane. But
we're talking about maggots in the food. We're talking about sleeping in their feces, sleeping in their own vomit.
If you're shitting yourself, that's your fault.
No, they have no choice. They don't have access to toilets.
Yes, they
you
do.
Dingus.
So wait, you're saying yes, ICE detention centers are inhumane, but you're saying that's a good thing.
I never said it's a good. It's not a good or bad thing.
But you think they're getting what they deserved?
Yeah.
I never said they're getting what they deserve. I said they're being contained, and they're being contained in the manner that we're able to afford to do so.
Do you think that it is okay in America for these people to be living in those conditions?
To feed someone maggots and let them shit themselves?
It's very obvious that no, the majority of people should not be fed maggots, but they're not being fed maggots. The majority of people...
According to what? Source, dude, trust me?
No, according to the data, we would have a lot more people dead in these detentions. We'd have
people are dying.
People are dying.
Of course, people die in prison as well. We would have a
prison, not jail.
People die in jail, sweetheart.
Are you a misogynist? You keep calling the women sweetheart. Is he a sweetheart?
He might be. I don't know. This is
Well,
LA.
Jesus Christ.
Can I just say why I came up here? That was the main thing
He's
where she
literally
said
the
that
most
has been going on
disrespectful
through each presidency. If we look at back at Obama and Biden, it was the same thing where they're lacking medical care. It's been happening from each presidency. It's about 5 to 10 deaths.
See how they don't have listening skills? Because we already made that point. That every administration, we made it that point twice. Every administration has failed on this. They don't listen.
In these detention camps each year, and then for Trump's first year, it's actually exceeded that at 30.
Yes.
So that's why I kind of agree, because they haven't been receiving the medical care. But you also have to see the influx of the illegals that came across is also contributing, because they have to build these places as quick as possible to deport as many people as possible, because we have.
By his logic, if the Trump administration truly anticipated that the numbers were going to double, triple, quadruple, then they should have prepared the detention centers for that inflation, and they didn't, because they don't care, because they're dehumanizing migrants.
Had such an influx.
That what you're describing did not happen to the same degree. The treatment did not happen. And again, I agree with you. The treatment under Biden and Obama, I have no defense for it. I'm not going to sit there and defend it. I fought it through every single administration, and I think it's deplorable. And I also have enough, having worked with DHS on.
Okay, I'm going to stop it there. Guys, I thank you for going through this with me. One of the things that was really important to me was that I, again, was not there to convince anybody on the opposition of my stance to, cross over the fence. My goal was to be an advocacy voice for not continuing to dehumanize people, whether you disagree with how they came to this country or not, whether you disagree with me that they are or aren't criminals. They are still people. They are still human beings who deserve due process. They are still people who deserve to be treated humanely. And that's why I was there. I wasn't necessarily trying to talk to the people in front of me or convince the people in front of me. I was there to talk to the people who were watching. So thanks for watching this with me. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. It's definitely a long one, but hopefully you got something out of it. And I will see you guys very, very soon.